We return to the wasteland, 1981 to be exact, a sequel to what was the most profitable movie ever made, a film that held the Guinness World Record for the highest box office to budget ratio for 20 years. Mad Max 2. At the time, a lot of audiences didn't know what the heck this movie was even about, nor did they know it was a sequel to anything, mostly due to the decision to change the title to The Road Warrior in the US. Despite doing well in its home in Australia, Mad Max 1 only had a limited theatrical run. So the decision then was to change the name to The Road Warrior, so that audiences didn't feel discouraged from seeing the sequel when they hadn't seen the original. And it worked. In an ironic twist, the home video version of the original was then marketed as the thrilling predecessor to The Road Warrior, inspired by films like Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, Shane, A Boy and His Dog, French comic anthology Metal Hurlant, and Joseph Campbell's book about mythological archetypes, A Hero with a Thousand Faces, which was recommended to him by George Lucas fresh after the success of Star Wars. This epic sequel is set 3 years after the first film. And things went full post-apocalypse super fast. We're talking full-on societal collapse, ecocide, depletion of petrol and guzzling, and BDSM aesthetics. It was by chance that costume designer Norma Morrisseau lived very close to a BDSM shop, and that's why all these characters look as distinct and freaky as they do. The story was thought up by Miller and Terry Hayes during their extended walks in Hastings, Victoria, where they encountered a small petrochemical plant and asked, what if this was the last compound on Earth? Who would live there? It was also inspired by Hayes, who did a War of the Worlds type radio broadcast about a war in the Middle East concerning oil. Having just gone through the oil and energy crises of 1973 and 1979, and not having heard the warnings before the radio segments, the Australian public was sent into a state of panic, as people probably had flashbacks of petrol station restrictions and the threat of societal collapse due to the inability to travel or to work, and driving to a petrol station in the morning in a massive line before petrol ran out. George Miller mentioned that during these massive queues to get gasoline, it took 10 days during the crisis until someone took out a gun and fired it into the air to ward off others who wanted the petrol. Police were called on scene to the petrol station in the middle of Melbourne. If it took 10 days for someone to resort to firing a gun, where would things go in 10 years? If there was going to be an apocalypse, this is the most plausible way that it would happen. We understand that Mad Max is a fictional entertainment franchise, but it probes at real-life fear and anxiety that absolutely freaks people out. And that's what makes a film like this not so far-fetched as one would think. It's a story that's deeply concerned about how different countries react and treat each other during conflicts and war. And it's deeply concerned about how finite our resources truly are, and how much we've built our societies around them. When they're nearly gone, what do? Heavy stuff, but important to know. Now, let's talk about the characters. Max, despite his quietness, is a man with a plan and backup plans. In order to survive in the wasteland, one must be resourceful and calculated among the chaos of the world around them. He doesn't trust very easily, nor should he in this situation, but we see through his words and actions that he does care about those who need help. After all, he's a man of justice who's conscious of his journey to find meaning after having lost everyone he loves. At least there's his beloved dog companion, Dog, the dog, until Max loses him too. It's no wonder Max doesn't want to get attached to anyone. He's a deeply damaged human being with trauma that most of us can't even imagine. He fits into the legendary archetype of the lone wandering warrior. In some cultures, this could be a cowboy, samurai, Viking, you name it. It's a character that has worked since the start of human storytelling. It's what makes him so compelling to audiences and works so well as an anti-hero. In the world of Mad Max, the less we know about the other characters in this series, the better. Other enigmas include Wes, the second in command of the antagonistic gang of marauders, who was a character that actor Vernon Wells had trouble embodying until the moment he saw himself in front of a mirror in full makeup and costume. A ferocious, brutal man of action with a mysterious fatherly or homoerotic bond with the Golden Youth, who was a motorcycle passenger woman gender-swapped to a man and played by Jerry O'Sullivan, who was just a courier delivering a package outside of the production office that Miller and Terry Hayes were at. Lord Humongous, a well-spoken negotiator and giant mountain of muscle wearing a freaky hockey mask pre-Jason with burn injuries and no ears, portrayed by Shell Nielsen. We don't actually know much about him besides that, and his original backstory was supposed to be Goose in the first film, or an ex-military guy. Arguably a misstep and weakest character of them all despite those muscles. But you can't deny how immediately intimidating and iconic he looks. The Gyro Captain is a scavenger who loves his snakes enough to sacrifice them during road combat and to eat them. That's kind of messed up. And he also loves lingerie. Played by Bruce Spence, and at first seems almost as scary as the other characters in the movie. But it turns out, with more time and context, he's just a lonely bloke and wants to find love and companionship while taking his gyrocopter for a spin around the post-apocalypse. I'd hang out with him at a barbecue as long as there are no snakes on the menu. He's agile, resilient, and is great for saving your skin when the situation is clutch. He deserves better than how he's treated. The other main character we have to keep an eye on is the Feral Boy, a child born into war and doom, and damn great boomerang thrower who has a love for music and backflips. Played by Emil Minty, and backflip performed by local Broken Hill gymnast Melissa Grillett. The film also does a great job setting up Chekhov's Mach R600 Cool Power Earth tanker, which appears in the beginning of the film. At first we thought Max was just going to use it for fuel and that's it, but 40 minutes later it makes a somewhat surprising return. After sneaking past the Marauders' camp with some gasoline, he loots a shotgun shell from a corpse and gyrocopters back to the location at the beginning of the film and starts the engine of the truck and hands the keys over to GC to undo his handcuffs and basically leaves his partner for dead. I feel bad for this guy. GC won't be far behind though, as things start to get dicey. Danger is everywhere in the wasteland, so before we know it, we have our first chase with this tanker in a chase scene that's great in its own right. Upon seeing Max passing through, the Marauders' encampment are on high alert. Well, most of them. Patrolling bad cops are on hot pursuit. Max makes this cop dude immediately regret it as he swerves into the encampments, crushing his buddy who was working under this car the whole time. Wes, hell-bent for leather and avenging his friend and partner the Golden Youth before his untimely boomerang fatality, takes out some of the tanker's wheels and is eventually able to grab and hang onto the tanker and strangle Max all the way back to the compound where the good guys are. Lord Humongous himself shoots up the engine, turning the tanker and Max into a smoky mess. Max would have been able to take out Humongous if it weren't for that dud shotgun shell he'd looted earlier. You can't catch a break in post-apocalypse. During the moat jump, a cop manning the rear dart gun is able to shoot out more wheels. The gyro captain throws one of his well-trained rubber snakes at them, which causes a chain reaction of him shooting his driver and launching the modified 1973 Valiant VH Coupe into some wreckage. Stunt director Max Aspin got into a brutal accident filming this scene. The injury was so bad that he had to leave the rest of the filming. No matter how much planning and skill goes into stunt work, performers are always risking their lives, especially with these giant, real, full-scale stunts. We can't stress enough how much work and danger the team put themselves in to create this film. You can't really make a film as dangerously these days in this manner. We engage in mortal combat involving elevated backflips, flamethrowers, and more crossbows. The damage the tanker received by the end of this sequence puts Max and everyone in a bad position. In order to capture the hardcore carnage in the film, the team built steel-reinforced armor for remote-controlled cameras in case the chaos got too close for comfort. They were nicknamed Ned Kellys after the notorious Aussie outlaw from the mid to late 1880s. As the final chase commences, we start the chase off with a bang, literally, as Humongous once again takes out his Smith & Wesson 44 caliber Model 29 revolver and aims it at the radiator. But unlike last time, the tanker got some upgrades and things don't go his way, even missing the gyrocopter, leaving him with one more bullet in the chamber. And if you weren't satisfied with that bang, boom! The main compound where the Northern Tribe settlers have built their commune was the most expensive movie set that was made in Australia at the time, and was designed by Byron Kennedy, who co-created the franchise with George Miller. Back in Mad Max 1, the two designed the original pitch for the story and raised their own money by responding to medical calls around town with Kennedy as the driver and Miller as the certified doctor. According to art director Grace Walker, since polypipe and the plastic that would typically be used to build props and film sets were too expensive, the materials they used to build the compound were real pipes and material from mines in Broken Hill that were closing down. Broken Hill was the first big mining town of Australia, and they even have a Mad Max 2 museum. We're treated to the biggest on-screen explosion in Aussie film history at the time. It was so big, in fact, that the special effects team had to enlist the help of the Australian Army to supply the explosives, and airline and mine workers had to be notified. It's brutal, the way the home of these survivors are intentionally obliterated right in front of their eyes. Damn. Stay tuned for the second installment where we break down the climactic signature chase, a scene so insane that you'll have trouble believing it even after watching it. We'll see you there.